Now I want to introduce you to someone that it's been way too long, Sanja. How are you? Good to
I
see
know.
you.
Oh, it's so good to see you, Al.
Yeah, you as well. You as well. It's the case where, when we're putting the program together, someone who embodies the people data for good theme. I mean, you're top of the list, and we've long talked about our role in understanding the employee experience, the worker experience, the human experience, at work. So I'm excited for what you have to share today, and we'll talk in a few minutes once you start wrapping up. Sound good?
Sounds perfect. And thank you so much for me. It's been too long. And every time I think of you, I just have this huge smile on my face. And I remember one of our first conversations that we had and just the profound impact that it had on me, the importance on human relationships and connecting people and just how we build the future work for humanity, for our colleagues, for our kids. And so it's really a pleasure every time I have an opportunity to get together with you and speak. And then thank you for the platform to share a little bit around what we're doing. And what an interesting time to be doing that. I get very emotional when we think about this situation. So with the moment of silence, I thought, oh no, it's they're just people out there making such a tremendous difference today. And I think for us, when we study organizational network analysis, today I'm going to talk about it more in the sense of mergers and acquisitions, but it's those human relationships at work, how people connect, the sense of safety, of having a place where they can really grow and thrive is so incredibly important. And for most, more than ever today, because the context has changed so much. And so I think it's something that's so important to think about how we manage this world of work. So taking a step back, I wanted to share just really quickly a little bit about Globant for those of us who might not know us well and why I'm speaking about mergers and acquisitions today. So, Globant is a global organization. We were founded in 2003, and one of the fastest organizations globally to come. We're in 17 different countries and 51 different offices. So, for something that's really interesting for being an organization that's very digitally native, and our colleague David from Nokia was just mentioning that, maybe for them too, it wasn't as challenging to be remote. For us, we were a bit lucky in that sense that we are a digital company and we do work with technology. I still have over 50 offices around the world. So for us, it really is in our DNA to go in the office, to collaborate. So it is a shift that we had to make during the crisis. And today we have over 12,000 people globally. So this large group of individuals that really, got together and started to think about how do we create the world of work where we can still continue to grow and thrive, but then also how do we do the same for our clients? How do we make sure that we have this business continuity? So Globant over the year grown predominantly organically, but as you can see on the timeline at the bottom of our screen, we have also made a number of strategic acquisitions, and each one was done for a different reason, many in different locations. And so what I'll do is I'll highlight just a few today because at time, as much as I'd love to go into one, but to talk a little bit about how we use the organizational network analysis that every time we acquire a company, we really make sure that they feel a part of our family, that no matter what the business reason behind the acquisition was, that these individuals really feel they joined an organization amazing for their career, that's amazing for them personally, and it's a place where they can really stay and grow and thrive over time. So I wanted to talk about the kind of data that we study. So there are many different ones, and we just talked about having data from different collaboration tools and different places, different external data sources. And in the particular analysis that I'll share today, we'll take a bit different data. So in our Globin story creation, we are actually headquartered out of Buenos Aires, Argentina, where I'm sitting today. And when our founders got together several years, about 5 years into into founding the organization, they thought, okay, we're on to something. We're no longer a startup. We're growing very quickly, but we never want to lose the essence of who we are. So they went and they defined the different values that would define who Globant is all the way through today, but they didn't want to keep it just written on walls. They wanted to make sure that every person that's a part of our organization really felt it in their DNA, really felt that thinking big made us different, and having fun made us different, and innovation and thinking about what we can do differently was something that we woke up and thought about every day. But they didn't want to leave that to chance, and they wanted everybody to have a voice. And so they did an experiment and created a technology where everybody in the organization could recognize somebody else when they saw them really live up to these values. And why was that important? Because it really made everybody a guardian of that culture. But not only that, it allowed every single employee to make every other person in the organization visible by saying that thank you. And in a recent study we did last year, we found that 97% of employees, so this was a study done across various industries, across various organizations, 97% of people said they wanted to feel appreciated for their work. People want others to see them. People want others to know the kind of contribution they're making. So we created this technology where everybody could have that kind of say. And over time, it evolved. Over time, and it started to include real time feedback. It started to include photo sharing as a way of grassroots creation. The reason why I'm spending talking about this data is that when we use it, we very much think of it as indicative of a relationship somebody has. So oftentimes when I talk, I joke I could be maybe in a meeting with somebody many times, but do I know that person well? Do I feel like they really support me as an individual? Do I really value their work? Maybe or maybe not. But when you start to exchange feedback, when you start to exchange real-time recognition, when you're sharing ideas, all of a sudden that relationship takes a different level. So we took all of that and we created that platform because we wanted employees to feel really valued. But then over time, what we realized with thinking about how do you use data for good is we had all of these great intentions, we had all of these great ideas of what we wanted to build, and we thought, but we have this incredible data to understand the heartbeat of our organization. Are the initiatives that we're doing to build a really stand apart culture working? How can we do something better? Where are there opportunities to? And so we started to not only make sure that we had a technology that made our employees feel good about themselves, but we started to take this data very seriously and started to do a lot of organizational network analysis to make sure that we were truly creating an atmosphere where employees could thrive, and that we could use that real-time behavioral data to understand, and in some ways have them tell us without even having to use words when things maybe weren't working as well, or maybe when we needed to change our strategies. So shifting all of those thoughts to mergers and acquisitions. So when you think about you're part of an acquired company, you're joining a larger organization, and you're thinking about how am I going to acclimate? What is this organization all about? What is my future going to be like? Will I like being here? Will I feel energized? Will I feel passionate to do the work? We started to study and make sure that every time we acquired an organization, we felt good about the place that we were putting these employees into, and we felt good about the experience that they were having both us and for the business. And so I'm going to highlight in my presentation today 3 different acquisitions that we made and the kind of analysis that we took a look at to make sure individuals really felt a part of Globant and a part of the larger family. So the first acquisition I'll talk about is an organization called Claris Technology that was done in India. And it was really Globant's first step into India. And it was a significant market for us. We acquired about 300 employees through this organization. And one of the unique aspects around this company was that they had a lot of individuals with really great UX skills. But probably the big difference around this one, the first step, was the also going into a new continent, and we wanted to make sure to be very well conscious of a proper culture in India, way people business there, but be able to bring these people in and say, hey, the Globant family, now the opportunities that are available to you. So we measured things to start. The first thing that we measured when we thought about these values and how an individual acclimates to organization was how they were connecting with others inside their organization. How were they adopting those different values? And we measured that through recognition. So recognition was happening between the individuals and Clarice. And because this technology is open to everybody in the organization, we were able to celebrate it no matter where we were in the world and get closer. We'll also be able to see what values were resonating really well, where were maybe opportunities for us to give greater examples of how they can instill that into their DNA working day to day. And we also measured outward recommendation. So it wasn't just recognition. It wasn't just the people inside the acquired company. That was the first step to say, how are they internalizing the values? Are they understanding what we are as an organization? Is there an opportunity to values better? And then also, are they connecting to individuals in other part of the company? Because only because of the time zone differences, the distance, we didn't want them to feel like they're in another part of the world and that they were isolated. We very much wanted to bring them in. So in measuring these internal recognitions, what we started to see is that there was really good acclimation. And for the first few quarters, there was equal amount within the acquired company as much as going outside. So we were saying that, okay, this acclimation is happening, they're internalizing, and they're to get individuals outside of India, which is great. But then we thought about, well, what is a way now, a few quarters have passed, what is a way that we can accelerate how they build relationships with the rest of the organization? And so one of the pieces of data that we actually took is we looked at for a few individuals to say, who could we send to India to spend some time there and help these individuals connect, and even in a more organic way, with the rest of the organization. And so we actually looked at the recognition data to choose cultural leaders and send them over to India, not only to help with the day-to-day, at this point the team had already gotten it, but be able to say, if you're looking to solve this challenge, I know exactly the people that you can talk with in Spain. And if you're looking to solve this challenge, I know exactly the people you can talk with in New York or Lima, because they were with the organization, they were so well connected that it came natural to them, and something that might have taken the individuals inside the India team a while to do was really sped up. And we could see that. You could see that in the line graph here, that all of a sudden, a few quarters in, actually a lot more recognition as measuring that as relationships was going outside of the team in India than inside. So we looked at our organizational network analysis. In retrospect, we were able to see that these blue dots were the Clarice team in India, and the green dots were the individual Globant, and just that huge shift that happened between a few individuals being connectors to actually a lot more group. Something else that was important to us is usually you'll see, and we still see that in the graph, that you have certain individuals that are strong connectors, and they could be managers, they could be leaders, they could be somebody that's just really good internally with relationships. But we wanted to make sure, if we were just looking at raw data and interactions, that it wasn't being by a select group of individuals, about the number of individuals interacting and that kind of distribution. So that was our one way of going into one country with a very different culture between India and Argentina, with an incredibly brilliant group of people, making sure that we acclimated them culturally to our organization. The next acquisition I wanted to share was from Romania, and it happened at the end of 2003. Reason why Globant, key reasons, there are many, but one of the key reasons why Globant has a small footprint is because we wanted to further expand into Europe. So I mentioned we already had offices in Spain and in France and the UK and Switzerland and many different places, but the European market is something that's very important to us. And in this case, it wasn't just one specialty, it was actually a multidisciplinary team that we were bringing into our family. And so what we do, now that we had gone through a few different acquisitions, we wanted to do a quick benchmark. And so we looked at Clarice in retrospect, and here you can see The first time we collected data for Clarice, and through the acquisition was in 2015 in Q3. And then you see each subsequent Q1 year. For us, it's important because when you measure relationships, it's important to have the same time frame. Or because if you take a bigger one, by nature, there's going to be more relationships. And so we thought, okay, so for us, at least years when we discussed for to bring in this organization, we know that having a cultural ambassador worked really well. So what could we do differently with small footprint in Romania to acclimate them faster? And what we do an mentoring program. And what that meant is that each individual at small foot signed in their specialty, but in a different country. And so what's the reason why that was so powerful is that it served two purposes. One, because they were in their specialty, they were able to augment their skills, they were able to share learning, different experiences. And the second one was that they were able to really naturally culturally acclimate them, and they would have mentoring calls once a week and ask, hey, how's everything going? Is there anything that I can help you? And really build those strong individual bonds. You can see here through the data is that actually what took us a few years in India, now all of a sudden we accomplished the same level of integration in 1 year. So it took a lot of those learnings and the idea of personal relationships and how do we escalate those. And we looked at different people over a quarter within and between groups and the number of interactions. So it wasn't just that how many people were, but also the depth of relationship. And we look at a lot of different numbers, but because of this time, I didn't want to share all of them, just a few KPIs in addition to the ONA and how those relationships were actually happening. One thing I also wanted to mention when it comes to creating an inclusive workplace, it's so important for most of our organizations, and that's where organizational network analysis really is just a beautiful tool to help us understand activity. And so for us, because we're a technology, we look at many different variables when it comes to inclusion, and one of those is the activity, and in this particular example, between men and women. And so what we want to make sure to do is we don't want to women part of our family and have them look around and say, this is not really the atmosphere where I feel like I can thrive, so I think I'll go look for a place elsewhere. We measure that through relationships, and we measure to make sure women are connected in the organization. We make sure here I'm just showing genders, but we also look at different jobs, different levels of seniority, just to make sure that people diversify the organizations. But in this particular case, what we found that was really interesting is when we look at the exchange of recognitions, and we call sending of recognition a star, is that women in this example were actually twice as active as men. And so that made us happy because we've realized that we created an atmosphere that even in an industry where there are fewer women than men, women felt comfortable to reach out, felt comfortable with connections, felt comfortable doing it with different individuals. We didn't clusters of women, but we saw that they were actually equally interacting with different people across the organization, which was really a finding. And so the final acquisition I wanted to talk about was mainly in America. And so this is interesting because out of all the acquisitions that I talked about, this one's the closest to ours. But I want to focus specifically on the acquisition in Peru because it was a reverse acquisition. It was a group of individuals that we brought into the organization where there were more people in the acquired company than people in Globant proper. And so here you'll actually see monthly measurements. The acquisition is so recent. It rode for a few days. We learned one was the cultural ambassadors. So we sent the same person that we sent to India to Peru, and he gave the office a really great talk about our culture, about our values, and how we live up to them. But further, I'll actually share a case at the end of the presentation. I don't have time. Did a lot of different activities around how can we bring people closer together, and what are the different initiatives that we can take. And one of the things that we see the data and connectivity, and this is one of the valuable things that you can see through organizational network analysis, is that there was something really peculiar in the data. And when my team and I were analyzing, we said, who is this person and what happened here? And it's unique to share this data because what we found is this individual actually, Globant has a ski trip every year. Person traveled Lima, Peru to Plata, Argentina for a surf trip. And it was an event that was organized by the company that was not work related, but it was between employees, colleagues, and it showed how that kind of event could really bring a person close to many people at once. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be in front of this audience, and during a time now, this is not a recommendation that I can make. And so this will take me really quickly, just to wrap us up. When we're thinking about mergers and acquisitions during of crisis, particularly during COVID, and hopefully we'll have many crises coming up after this, but what are some things when you're, whether you're hiring people more on an individual basis, whether you're going through an acquisition, what is something that you can do to really be able to do so effectively, even this during this time that's anything but ordinary? So some of the initiatives that we did that also had an impact on our acquisitions and the integration, a new value kind. And for us, that was it was important because we wanted our employees to really understand how valuable and important on a professional level, on a personal level it is today, and we wanted to share all of credibles with everyone in the organization so they can feel supported and they know that that's going on across the organization. Because now we're the vast majority, if not all of us, are working from home. We shared different photos of what do those adventures look like today. When I'm office, I joke that I never knew how many of my colleagues like to wear costumes when they're at home. People with kids know that that's been a challenge for a lot of working parents, but it's been really fun to open the doors and really feel close to people in a different kind of way, even now more than ever. Different safety campaigns, and then kind of back to the surf trip, really recommending having different kind of activities that will still pull people together, that it's not just on a specific project or initiative, but also things that bring us together more from an interest standpoint. So mindfulness, yoga classes, cooking courses, it's the surf tip taken virtual. But when you think about how can you help build relationships, bring people closer together, these are some really incredibly important initiatives to take. And so I'm at my two last slides because I know I'm coming up at my time too. So what we wanted to do is also continue to measure. We're doing this company-wide, but I wanted to just show a couple of examples of our more recent acquisitions and continue to measure connectivity during this time of change and crisis to make sure that people are still connecting to each other. Because today, it's hard, especially for people who were in the office, to know how are people doing. So I might still be showing up to all of my meetings, but I'm starting to not feel supported. I'm myself isolated, just stress, but I don't know how colleagues to lean on or open up. We have all of that support because we know that it's going to continue to help with efficiency, effectiveness, motivation. And so what we did is we ran analysis both for small footprint out of Romania and electric side of Latin America. That connectivity remained and that it remained consistent over time. And one example that we saw was that in Romania, we had a small dip in the between people, but last time I pulled the data was yesterday, and we're seeing that come back up, which is so important because we know the crisis hit really hard in March, but we're working really extra hard through the different initiatives to make sure that the connectivity still exists, and we think the things that we're doing are the right things, and we'll continue to monitor that very much on a separate basis. And the last thing I'll mention before I wrap up is that one of the things that we're launching actually next week is the prediction of connectivity. So we've been monitoring how different employees are entering the different relationships have. And what we're doing is we're looking at within person changes to say, depending on somebody's connectivity over the last few months, are they starting to disengage? And if they're starting to socially disconnect, we want to make sure to help, even on an individual basis, let their managers know, so that way they can make sure, are they still supported? Do they have the right things in place? Anything else they need? Because one of the things that we know about crisis is that the needs are going to continue to change, and we all made a huge shift at the beginning, but we're going to have to keep tuned with what it is their employees need, both on a global level, but also very much on an individual. So we're looking at all the different ways to really empower the leaders to be able to support their groups anywhere from the individual to the organization level. So that's all I have. As Al knows, I'm so incredibly passionate about this, and I could go on forever, and I'm so sorry I ran a few minutes over, but there was
Oh
so
gosh,
much I
no
wanted to
apologies. No apologies. No, it's fantastic, and it's just like as you're going, I had time for another podcast with Sanja, because that's an evolution from when we last spoke, certainly. And there's a couple questions that came in, and they have a similar theme, so we'll sneak this in. And I'm just going to read it verbatim from Lucas Manser. When did you decide? Actually, if you can see it, you can see it, but I'll read it to you. When did you decide ONA was the right tool, and I would say approach as well, to use versus other solutions?
Yeah, so we really started to rely more heavily on ONA about a year and a half ago. Because again, when we looked at different relationships, that's one beauty of working for a technology company. You can build a lot of things yourself, you can buy a lot of tools, and then you can do a lot of internal analysis. And what we started to see is when we looked at trending data, we had so many questions. Why is this trend happening? Are there certain drivers? How can we impact it? Is it happening equally? And so we used it a while ago to be able to measure the different connectivity. And for us, it just gave, it's such an incredible playground because of the way that you can look at it, because be the change, viewing like in all the different diversity. You can look at connectivity between different countries, different offices, different practice areas. That for us, once we started to use, couldn't go back. So it's not something recent for us, but it's certainly been incredibly helpful in the recent months to get this just completely different ability to view what's going on inside the organization.
Well, Sonia, again, I can talk with you all day about this, because it's not only is ONA and I think we've talked about this. It's something that was kind of a cute thing out there. It's like relationship analytics, and then it became more substantive when we understood that it was actually reflecting human connection, and it had a humanistic aspect to it. And it's not a heavy lift in many respects. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, yes, you can do more passive approaches, which are more expensive. But if you just do an active survey based approach, then you can do it relatively quickly and not with much cost. Is that right?
Yes, yes. It's incredible. I would really encourage people to take a look at it. I've worked with data my entire career, and it just really opened up my eyes into the organizational dynamics in a very different way.
Well, again, thank you for contributing in the way that you do. Thanks for making time, bringing your insights and ideas from Buenos Aires. Gosh, it's great to see you. And again, hopefully we'll be able to get together soon. You be well.
Oh, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I left my contact information here for anybody who wants to connect outside and if there's any way I can help, I would be happy to. And thank you. Amazing to see you always, and looking forward to seeing you again soon.